Oh my goodness, who in the world could have possibly thought this incredible thing?
Oh, they've left a trail on the floor.
I'm going out for cigarettes.
In short, to sum up, people's windows just shattered everywhere.
An urgent, epic retaliation from the Ukrainian armed forces. Russia was hit deep inside its own territory. A massive attack with hundreds of drones. Moscow and the Moscow region are in a panic. Airports are paralyzed. Russian air defense collapsed like a house of cards. The Prime Minister of Armenia became a hostage in the sky over Moscow. A bloody December at full force. The Ukrainian armed forces cut the power in several cities at once. And that's not all. A trap from the security service of Ukraine at sea. A Russian vessel was sunk. All this and more coming up next. Watch until the end. Ukraine greets you today. Renata Aslanova here with the latest events. Our forces unleashed a firestorm of vengeance on the Russians. The Ukrainian armed forces carried out one of the largest scale attacks on Russia. Hundreds of drones broke through deep into the Russian Federation. Moscow is in chaos with explosions everywhere. The capital and the Moscow region shook for several hours straight. Thunder, flashes, panic. The sky was on fire. The air defense systems were pushed to their limits. Moscow's airports were paralyzed. For 7 hours, not a single plane took off or landed. The plane carrying Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan became a hostage to the chaos in Russian airspace. Because the airport was closed, the plane circled over the Tver region for almost an hour, desperately waiting for permission to land. But Moscow never gave it. As a result, the plane was urgently diverted to Pulkovo, where it landed only around 1 in the morning. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin was quick to claim that the air defense allegedly shot down 32 drones that were heading for the capital. But he did not provide any evidence. Only a vague statement that emergency services are working at the site where the debris fell. What is the Kremlin hiding? That question remains open. In the evening, the lights went out in Belgorod. Our forces struck the city's thermal power plant. Local residents heard the sounds of explosions. After that, the lights went out in some houses near the Belgorod CHP. At the same time, in Voronezh, a stairwell collapsed in one of the apartment buildings. The regional governor, Alexander Gusev, was quick to claim that debris from a high-speed target allegedly shot down outside Voronezh had supposedly fallen in the left bank part of the city. He also admitted that power outages began on several streets at once due to a damaged power line.
It's just hanging there. It's loud, it's crazy.
According to Gusev, key elements of the heating networks were also damaged, which threatened serious accidents. In addition, Voronezh also faced problems with water supply.
In short, people's windows were just shattered, destroyed.
Drones also visited the Smolensk region. According to eyewitnesses, Ukrainian drones attacked 2 strategic sites at once. The Dragobuzh thermal power plant and the region's largest plant for the production of mineral fertilizers and nitrogen compounds, Dragobuzh, came under fire. Russians report powerful explosions and large-scale damage. Veliki Novgorod in Russia also found itself in the front row of the fireworks show. Oh my God!
Who could have thought this? Oh my God! This is something terrifying. It's burning.
After the shelling, a massive fire broke out at the industrial site. Russian air defense tried to shoot down the drones.
It's still very much going on. This persistent situation continues, with Maxim once again demonstrating his remarkable presence and unwavering involvement in the unfolding events.
Local telegram channels report that at least 6 explosions thundered in Veliki Novgorod, after which a fire was spotted in one of the city's districts. And the locals hurried to film this fiery apocalypse. Monitoring channels report that the fire in Veliki Novgorod occurred at the Akron chemical plant. It is known that the enterprise produces a wide range of nitrogen and complex fertilizers, as well as industrial products. In total, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, 287 Ukrainian drones were allegedly shot down over Russian regions, including 118 drones over the Bryansk region. Trouble never comes alone. Thus, the SBU made a sensation in the Black Sea. Sea Baby maritime drones struck another oil tanker that is part of Russia's Shadow Fleet. A powerful strike turned it into scrap metal. Critical damage. Preliminary reports indicate a total loss of function. Reportedly, the vessel, sailing under the flag of the Comoros Islands with its transponder turned off, was moving at full speed toward a Russian port terminal in Novorossiysk. Operation done by Security SVC of Ukraine, SBU with Ukrainian Navy. Even Russian military correspondents concede the strike was precise and devastating. A blow to the Kremlin's wallet. The SBU revealed the value of the destroyed tanker, and the numbers are simply shocking. The vessel was worth $30 million, and in a single trip it transported petroleum products worth another $60 million. And this is only the beginning. According to the security service, this is already the 5th tanker from Putin's Shadow Fleet destroyed in the past 2 weeks. It is this fleet that the Kremlin uses to circumvent international sanctions. But now the scheme is falling apart at the seams.
The Security Service of Ukraine continues active measures to reduce the inflow of petrodollars into the budget of the Russian Federation, and
it has also become known that long-range drones of the Security Service of Ukraine struck an oil production platform belonging to the company Lukoil Nizhnevolzhskneft. This is Ukraine's first strike on Russian facilities related to oil extraction in the Caspian Sea. It is reported that at least 4 hits on the offshore platform have been recorded. As a result of the attack, oil and gas production from more than 20 wells serviced by the platform has stopped.
the Security Service of Ukraine continues successful special operations against the Russian oil and gas sector, constantly expanding their geographic scope. The explosion in the Caspian Sea is yet another reminder to Russia that all its enterprises working for the war effort are legitimate targets, no matter where they are located.
An extreme place for Russia. Zelensky officially launches the Ukrainian Sapsan ballistic missiles. The enemy will experience real hell, and this is only the beginning. The armed forces of Ukraine are already planning strikes from which the Kremlin will not have time to recover. All the sensational details are coming up next. Sapsan in action. The armed forces of Ukraine have begun using domestically produced ballistic missiles to strike the enemy. The exact specifications of the Sapsan missile are not being disclosed, but its deployment by the Ukrainian military will allow them to hit enemy targets, possibly even more effectively than with ATAK-MS. Ukrainian missiles have twice the explosive power, fly faster, and have a greater range.
What is the exceptional advantage of using the Sapsan operational tactical missile system? It is that it can be used against targets on the territory of the Russian Federation, primarily on Russian territory, as well as against legitimate military targets on the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. This is exclusively the sovereign right of the Ukrainian side itself.
In addition to Sapsan, the Ukrainian army is also using several other domestically produced missiles against the aggressor country. This was stated by the president of Ukraine.
This shows that the Ukrainian side, despite the intensity of strikes on defense industry enterprises, has managed not only to preserve the infrastructure of its defense industry, but also to expand and scale up the production of its own strike weapons. This testifies to the presence of qualified engineering personnel and sufficient funding for Ukrainian defense industry enterprises, which are capable of scaling up the production of Ukrainian-made strike weapons. Virtually all Ukrainian strike weapons are made exclusively from Ukrainian components.
Let us recall that in September of this year, Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine was actively developing long-range weaponry. He stated that the tests were successful and the next stage is the launch of serial production. Earlier, Ukraine began production of Flamingo cruise missiles with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. On Friday, December 5th, the company Firepoint delivered another batch of cruise missiles to the Ukrainian military. Also in November, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked important targets on Russian territory. Long Neptune missiles were used for the strikes. Another of the most important developments has been drone missiles such as Polyanitsia, Peklo, Ruta, and Bars.
The Ukrainian side is ready to scale up and to use its own strike assets against the territory of the Russian Federation. They were referring to the Sapsan and accordingly the Flamingo. In addition, Ukraine's defense forces have scaled up the production of strike drones with a target range of over 1,500 kilometers.
Ukrainian armed forces are successfully striking military targets in the Russian Federation, and oil refineries are also in the crosshairs of drone systems.
It was precisely the use of Ukrainian strike assets that made it possible to effectively block the operations of about 40% of Russian oil refineries. According to the Russian side itself, the losses to the Russian budget are estimated at around 100%, $100 billion. But it should also be noted that the Ukrainian side does not intend to stop at the results already achieved.
Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has ramped up weapons production and the implementation of new technologies, which are already being used on the front lines. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased by dozens of times. Thanks to private companies, Ukraine will be able to create innovations in the defense industry and effectively implement them on the battlefield.
Starting from the new year, the Ukrainian defense industry and the defense forces of Ukraine will receive Ukrainian ballistic missiles with a target range of about 800 kilometers. It should be noted that the manufacturing company has announced the development of two ballistic missiles with a target range of up to 200 and respectively up to 800 kilometers.
All this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weapons that destroy important enemy military targets at great depth.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
An explosion deep inside Russia. Ukrainian armed forces drones carried out unimaginable revenge. The Kremlin is in panic. One of the key pro-war bloggers has admitted to a shameful exposure. The world's second largest army can't even provide its soldiers with socks. A complete collapse before the eyes of the whole world. But this is only the beginning of the collapse of Putin's front. All the shocking details from the front lines. Watch.
Drones in Russia's angles. There are an airfield and an oil depot belonging to the occupiers there. Drones also reached Volgograd, causing a strong reaction among the local residents.
413. All the passports are here, none of the problems remain.
The occupiers near the Belgorod border are sleeping uneasily. While Ukrainians are attacking Russian military targets, the latter in turn continue to shell Ukrainian civilians. This video shows the aftermath of a nighttime attack on Chernihiv, Ukraine. Good afternoon. Russian troops attacked Okturka in the Sumy region. Hits were recorded on the roof and wall of an apartment in a 9-story building. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump, who has taken it upon himself to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine, claims that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is allegedly not ready to accept a peace plan, if it can even be called that.
According to U.S. law, which was enacted back in 2017 during Trump's presidency and signed by Trump himself, the United States will not recognize any territories that Russia has annexed from Ukraine since 2014, because once again, there is a corresponding law in place. In other words, if you want to do what's written in this plan to recognize Russian territories, you first need to change your domestic legislation. Your own law prohibits you from doing this. So, not only is the initiator of the proposal external, and without the expertise of the State Department and Congress it's illegal, but the proposals within these very points also contradict US law.
There's a clear example of how Trump knows how to make deals. After the conflict was settled by the US president, clashes began on the border between Thailand and Cambodia. Numerous murders, rapes, and other crimes in the African country of Mali are being committed by militants from the African Corps, which is subordinate to the Russian Ministry of Defense, and it replaced Wagner. Accordingly, knowing the treachery of the Russians, no one can guarantee that Ukraine won't face a repeat of the conflict either.
No other security guarantee more effective than strengthening Ukraine's defense forces can be given to us by anyone. So the only thing we can do in terms of security guarantees is to strengthen our army, not reduce it. And in terms of peace, we see that there are calls to reduce the Ukrainian army.
The son and namesake of the American president, Donald Trump Jr., does not rule out that his father may distance himself from Russia's war against Ukraine if attempts to achieve peace are unsuccessful.
Russia supports peace talks only for one purpose: to persuade the US to stop further assistance to Ukraine, and at the very least to minimize it. Because the war that Russia could have, as they say, as was expected in Russia first and foremost, and as was thought in the West, to win in 4 days, to capture Kyiv and all of Ukraine in 2 months. It's already been going on for almost 4 years. And to say that Russia is achieving success, well, that would be far, far too optimistic for Russia.
The so-called conquerors are going into Ukraine barefoot and barehanded, and they're the ones saying it themselves.
3.5 years of war. Really? We can't even centrally supply our army with underwear and socks.
Apparently, the Russian command simply doesn't see the point in spending money on their soldiers, who are eliminated almost instantly. And to cover up the losses, the dead are listed as deserters. Partisans are the ones reporting this. Despite the problems in Vovchansk, Siversk, Mirnohrad, and Pokrovsk caused by the intense pressure from Russian forces, Donbas is holding on, according to Ukrainian war correspondents. Kupiansk is being shelled, but it still stands. Here, the Russian army is also taking a beating from the Ukrainian armed forces.
Something incredible happened in Kupiansk. Russian propaganda has burst. The Ukrainian armed forces control most of the city. Russian generals are simply losing sleep. All the stories about occupation are just Kremlin fiction. For all the details about the situation there, stay tuned.
Another one of Putin's so-called victories, of course, only in words.
Dear comrades, the armed forces of the Russian Federation are confidently maintaining the initiative and continue to carry out the tasks of the special military operation.
They talk about the complete capture of Kupiansk, the Kharkiv region, and the alleged encirclement of 15 battalions in the city. The enemy has been making these claims about the Ukrainian Defense Forces since the beginning of December. This is noted by the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation.
In fact, in order to fuel this information psychological special operation, we are giving them Kupiansk. It is obvious that the Russians have already involved the so-called top officials of their state. This includes citizen Gerasimov, who calls himself the chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. Accordingly, this is at least one of the Putins who is also taking part in such an information psychological operation. And accordingly, we see that even some Western media are getting involved, reporting on the complete encirclement of Kupiansk, on its total capture. Moreover, these are quite reputable publications.
The claim by the Russians is also refuted by the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, who added that Ukrainian troops have managed to significantly improve their tactical position directly in Kupiansk. At the moment, a successful counter-sabotage operation is ongoing in the city, aimed at eliminating the enemy, of whom only a few dozen remain there.
It is obvious that the Russians have not managed to achieve such significant successes on the battlefield despite the fierce fighting. Despite the fact that the grouping of Russian troops operating from the northern Slobozhansk direction all the way to the Crimean front is present, today the intensity of combat operations is extremely high. However, even after concentrating massive forces on the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd directions, they are not achieving success on our other hot sectors of the front, including the Kupiansk direction. Obviously, it is necessary to show that all these efforts by the Russian troops, first of all, they are achieving results, positive results, rapid advances, and this information needs to be conveyed to our European partners as much as possible to show them Ukraine's weakness and accordingly the strength of the Russian army.
According to the operational situation, as of the morning of December 10th in the Kupiansk direction, our defenders repelled the occupiers' assault actions towards Petropavlivka and Bohuslavka.
We are saying that the enemy has been pushed back to the northern outskirts of the city of Kupiansk itself, from where they had entered. And those positions, which sometimes change hands 5 or 6 times, or even more, are now under the control of the defense forces. Today, a counter-sabotage operation is underway. In other words, we are essentially talking about clearing certain sectors of the city of Kupiansk of Russian troops in order to try to push them out completely, to push the Russians beyond the city limits.
Nevertheless, the Russians continue to shell the Kupiansk area with guided bombs, while Ukrainian rescuers evacuate the local population under fire.
The evacuation continues, carried out by the relevant army units and police forces, and it will continue. People need to be evacuated from Kupiansk because this forced evacuation really must be an evacuation. Civilians in this situation cannot interfere with the defense forces. We have seen how this ends, particularly in Kupiansk itself. You remember the situation when the Russians actively used civilian clothing? By disguising themselves, they could infiltrate the city center and carry out their so-called flash mobs there, these so-called flag planting actions. And most importantly, they try to push further into our positions.
Those who still decide to stay in the city are openly not happy to see the occupiers and give a direct.
This is the complete and comprehensive answer to the question.
A man without any fear looks the occupiers who slipped into his building entrance straight in the eye and tells them to mind their own country. And he recalls how Ukrainian soldiers used to share their food with him.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and stay up to date with the main news. There's more to come.